actually nothing I wouldn't eat or wouldn't drink or wouldn't try. If the person okayed it, I would eat a human. If you were at a very fancy restaurant and they were like a tiny piece of human meat.
No. I think the only way
You wouldn't try a tiny bite?
No.
Really?
Absolutely not.
Is that terrible?
Listen closely, because this isn't just another Hollywood story. This feels like something that was never meant to surface, something carefully tucked away beneath years of applause, charm, and a carefully manufactured illusion. For almost 20 years, Ellen DeGeneres wasn't just a daytime personality, she was a symbol. Flawless, protected, untouchable, the kind of image that doesn't crack unless something forces it to. And maybe now something finally has. Because while audiences were laughing, clapping, and buying into the warmth, something else was quietly building in the background. Forgotten clips, uncomfortable interviews, moments that once passed as jokes, now resurfacing with a completely different energy. And right in the middle of that shift sits Chrissy Teigen, not just a guest, but someone who moved within that inner circle. Someone who understood the tone of that stage, and possibly let something slip that wasn't meant to be heard twice. It was subtle, almost invisible at the time. A single remark, disguised as humor, buried under laughter. But revisited today, it lands heavier, colder, like it was never really a joke to begin with. And then another moment surfaces. Sandra Bullock sitting across from Ellen, casually recounting a cosmetic treatment so bizarre, so unsettling in its details that the audience hesitated. You can almost feel it watching back, that split second where laughter fades into confusion, where something feels off. And when that clip is placed alongside the growing whispers tied to Jeffrey Epstein, the strange phrasing, the redacted records, the patterns nobody wants to fully connect, it stops feeling like coincidence. It starts feeling like alignment. Because when you line up the fragments, the jokes, the interviews, the resurfaced footage, they don't scatter. They point. And now the tension isn't about whether people are noticing. It's about how long they chose not to.
Also, a lot of language that appears to be coded regarding food. I wanted to let you know the crew really appreciated the pizza. Another email read, "This is better than a Chinese cookie, see attached. Let's go for pizza and grape soda again." This one talks about, yeah, that's the pizza. You mean radiating a soft glow with the look of bliss and excitement. There's one more, I think, in this list as well. Sorry, I have no stomach for even the slightest aggro. I don't have the stomach for it for any drama, imaginary or real. I'm still fragile off the last one and scared of shadows. This is in response to some videos that were shared where Jeffrey Epstein himself says, I watched all of these videos, don't send any more. And then Ghislaine is like, I can't stomach any of this. What the fuck did you send that Jeffrey Epstein was like?
The second that clip found its way back into circulation, the entire narrative tilted. For years, it had been sitting there unnoticed, filed away as just another awkward celebrity moment. A little edgy, slightly uncomfortable, but ultimately forgettable. Something people laughed off and moved past. But now, in a time where every old frame gets dissected, every tone reanalyzed, every word questioned, it didn't land the same anymore. Because when Chrissy Teigen casually admitted she'd try anything, even things most people wouldn't dare say out loud, it no longer sounded like a joke. It sounded like a crack in the surface. A glimpse. Brief but enough. And that's when the focus shifted. Not just toward her, but toward everyone in her orbit. Because in Hollywood, distance is an illusion. The circles people move in. They overlap for a reason. And for years, one name kept appearing beside hers again and again, Ellen DeGeneres. The same Ellen who built a global reputation on kindness. The same Ellen who lit up daytime TV with laughter, dancing under bright lights like nothing could ever reach her. But take away the music, strip back the applause, remove the mask carefully built over decades. What's underneath? That's the question people couldn't stop asking. And it didn't come from nowhere. It came from repetition, from patterns that didn't quite sit right the second time around. 20 years in front of the camera, and almost no visible change. No real aging. No cracks in the image. Just the same polished version, preserved year after year. At first, people admired it. Then they started wondering. And now they're questioning it. Because in an industry obsessed with youth, Ellen didn't just keep up. She seemed untouched by time. And then that interview came back.
Talk about this facial that you're obsessed with. How many, did you get the whole cast of Ocean's 8 to do
Not
this?
everybody.
Okay, good, smart ones.
Just those that I thought would appreciate it.
Okay, explain what it is.
Well, it's this way in which one forces through microneedling. It's like a little roller with these, some of you, I think many of you know it, and it pushes through the skin and ruptures the collagen and then boosts it. You look like a burn victim for a day, but then it pushes the
What are you pushing into the skin, Sandra?
Sarah?
Carrie? What are you pushing into the skin?
Well, you push in whatever the facialist would like to insert into your pores.
But what is it?
It is an extraction from a piece of skin that came from a young person far, far away, and they somehow figured out how to extract.
It's foreskin from a.
Sandra Bullock sat across from Ellen DeGeneres, smiling, at ease, the kind of moment audiences had seen 100 times before. Light jokes, easy laughter, total comfort. Until almost without warning, the conversation drifted somewhere unexpected. A beauty treatment came up. Not just any treatment, something rare, something elite. And when Ellen leaned in, asking what it actually involved, the answer didn't land clean. It hesitated. It circled. Like it wasn't supposed to be spelled out too clearly. There was talk of substance, something extracted, something tied to a younger source. The kind of wording that slips by in real time, but lingers when you replay it. The audience laughed. But online, people paused, because context changes everything. And when that clip started making rounds again, right as conversations around Jeffrey Epstein and his files were gaining traction, it didn't feel like a throwaway moment anymore. It felt like a fragment, a piece of something bigger. Then the emails entered the picture. Thousands of them. Conversations that, at first glance, seemed completely ordinary. Pizza, pasta, jerky, grape soda. Harmless words. Everyday phrases. But when placed under scrutiny, patterns began to emerge. Repetition in strange places. Language used in ways that didn't quite align with normal context. Enough for analysts, independent researchers, and online communities to start asking uncomfortable questions. Nothing was proven, but nothing was convincingly dismissed either. And that's where the pressure started to build. Because when you stack vague language, resurfaced interviews, and overlapping social circles filled with powerful names, you don't get clarity. You get tension, the kind that slowly pushes against the surface until something gives. And just as that pressure reached its peak, Ellen stepped away. No spectacle, no dramatic send-off, no long goodbye tour, just a quiet exit. A relocation overseas, far from the center of the noise, somewhere calmer, more distant, less accessible. Officially, it was framed as a personal shift, a lifestyle choice. But not everyone accepted that. Because once again, the timing, clips resurfacing, conversations growing louder, renewed attention on Epstein's connections. And then, almost perfectly aligned with that rise in scrutiny, one of the most recognizable faces in entertainment quietly removes herself from the spotlight. Maybe it's coincidence. Or maybe it's the same pattern playing out again, just in real time. And what makes it even more unsettling isn't what people are saying. It's what they're not. Because Hollywood doesn't usually stay quiet. When controversy hits, statements flood in. Teams respond. Narratives get shaped quickly. But here, the silence feels calculated, measured, like people are choosing their distance carefully, waiting to see which way the story turns before stepping in. And in that silence, one question keeps getting louder, impossible to ignore. If there's truly nothing here, why does it feel like everything is being avoided? And that's the line nobody wants to cross out loud. Because the moment you stop treating these clips like random, disconnected moments and start lining them up side by side, the entire narrative shifts. What once looked like isolated incidents begins to feel like pieces of the same structure. Suddenly, it's not about one interview, one offhand joke, or one celebrity slipping up. It becomes about a pattern, quiet, layered, sitting in plain sight the whole time. And the deeper people dug, the more the timeline itself started raising questions. For years, Ellen DeGeneres didn't just exist in the spotlight, she controlled it. Every public moment felt curated, every answer polished. Even when controversy surfaced, the response was precise, apologies delivered carefully, emotion revealed in controlled doses. That level of consistency doesn't happen by accident. That's strategy. That's discipline built over decades in front of the camera. But then, something broke. Because when public opinion turned, it didn't slowly fade, it fractured. Suddenly, former staff began speaking out, describing an environment that felt tense, even intimidating. Guests started hinting at interactions that didn't match the cheerful image on screen. Comedians who had crossed paths with her for years began painting a very different picture behind the curtain. Someone more distant, more exacting, less forgiving than the persona millions believed in. Two identities, one public, one private. And that contrast led to a deeper, more uncomfortable question. If one version was carefully constructed, how much of the rest was too? At the same time, a different kind of investigation was unfolding online. Not driven by headlines or official statements, but by patterns. Digital researchers, independent analysts, people who track details instead of narratives, began connecting dots. Not making claims, not jumping to conclusions, just mapping proximity. Who appeared together, who shared spaces, which names kept resurfacing in the same circles over and over again. And one of those names kept returning, Chrissy Teigen. Not because she clarified anything, but because she didn't. In an industry where every controversial word is quickly reshaped, softened, or walked back within hours, silence stands out. And when that silence exists alongside resurfaced clips, uneasy jokes, and overlapping connections, it stops feeling accidental. It starts feeling unfinished. And then there's the detail no one can quite decode, the language itself. The emails linked to Jeffrey Epstein didn't just raise concern because of the names attached. They raised questions because of how they were written. The repetition, the strange phrasing, words that felt misplaced in otherwise serious exchanges. Terms that appeared again and again across different threads, different people, different timelines. On the surface, it all looked ordinary. But under scrutiny, It felt anything but.
I'll give you another example here. Epstein sends a message to someone. She looks pregnant, reacting to a photo. And the client replies back to Epstein, "You mean radiating a soft glow with the look of bliss and excitement? Yeah, that's the pizza." I cannot be clearer than this, that this is a code word. It makes no sense in that context whatsoever. And this, on top of the example I gave you earlier, when his virologist gave him the medicine for having an erection, erectile dysfunction, I assume, or it could be even Viagra, and then told him to wash his hands, go have pizza and grape soda. That's been mentioned time and time again. Having adult men, successful men that are very health oriented, constantly talk about pizza and pizza with grape soda, which I've never heard before.
I don't know if that specific combination was part of the whole Pizzagate thing, but it's definitely mentioned a lot because I saw that phrase, so I looked it up and was like, is this actually like in there multiple times? And it most definitely is.
There's another one here. Have you seen the beef jerky mentions as well? There's an email here from Jeffrey Epstein. Someone else says, Francis has time to come tomorrow to show me how to make it. Jerky, anyone? He will also bring you a taste of his jerky recipe from the restaurant and sends a warm hello. He's working at a restaurant called Cook's. Wait for it, beef jerky and steak. Yes, time at 3 p.m. And there's other emails of him talking about beef jerky. Another one here, Jeffrey Epstein sending it to Steve Hansen saying, hope you're feeling better. Did we analyze the beef? Did we analyze the jerky? Now there's talks about jerky, referencing human meat. It could be for scientific research, could be something else that's even sicker. But there's more emails here talking about beef jerky. Have you had time to go through those? There's one here. Thank you so much. Super cool. IT guy setting up Surface right now. We are ridiculously excited, and beef jerky delicious. Thank you. Thanksgiving. So yeah.
It is very. Now I've got all those emails saved. I'd actually had somebody send to me all of those to say, hey, would you check this out? So I have them. I have not read through all of them, but there's no shortage of terms that are phrased in a peculiar way. Muffin is another one. I've seen that a couple of times. I talked about when he says whoops. That seems to be in very sometimes he says that in very odd terms that seem like they're referring to somebody dying or getting.
Pizza, jerky, grape soda. Individually, nothing. But placed side by side, something doesn't sit right. Specialists couldn't lock down a single clear meaning. Officials offered no definitive clarification. And somehow, that lack of answers became louder than any explanation. Because when something simple turns complicated without reason, people don't stop digging. They sharpen their questions. And every road leads back to one thing, visibility. Because in Hollywood, visibility is currency until it flips into exposure. For years, Ellen DeGeneres was everywhere. Daytime television, red carpets, award stages, inner celebrity circles, her presence felt constant, unavoidable, like part of the system itself. And then, almost without warning, distance, a move overseas, the UK, fewer appearances, fewer statements, less control over how the story was being told. And that's when speculation spreads the fastest, not when there are answers, but when there aren't. But here's where it turns even more uncomfortable, because this isn't just about one figure stepping back. It's about how the entire machine responds when pressure starts building. Not with outrage, not with transparency, but with hesitation, with carefully neutral statements, with vague positioning, with a kind of silence that doesn't feel accidental, it feels chosen. Like everyone senses something shifting, but no one wants to be first to say it out loud. That's how systems shield themselves, not through loud denials, but through quiet distance. And in that kind of environment, even the smallest detail starts carrying weight. A resurfaced interview that hits differently. A line that no longer sounds like a joke. A connection that once felt random, now sitting under a microscope, refusing to look harmless. None of it confirms anything, but none of it fades away either. And that's what makes this impossible to ignore. Because this story doesn't explode all at once. It builds, slowly, quietly, piece by piece, until the question stops being whether something happened, and becomes how much has already been seen, and simply dismissed. And right now, it feels like people are finally starting to pay attention.
About to sound completely insane, but just hear me out. This pertains to the Epstein files, the Clintons, and cannibalism, and I feel completely fine and am totally okay. Alright, let's do this. How do we know if someone is a cannibal? Well, they could have the Kuru disease, which is a fatal neurodegenerative disease that spreads through eating brain tissue. It has a long incubation period, 10 to 30 years. Early symptoms are headaches, coordination issues, anxiety, and inappropriate laughter. Middle stage, severe tremors and shaking, loss of balance, and slurred speech. Late stage, inability to walk, dementia, and the forever sleep. Do you know of any elites rumored to have consumed human flesh? But I'm not accusing anyone of anything, this is just a fun little joke video. With truth in the mix, in Papua New Guinea they call human long pig. We just love to have fun here. No, the Kuru disease has nothing to do with the Epstein files or anyone in them. Definitely not the Clintons. And I feel fantastic, so yeah, have a good day.
And this is where the narrative stops feeling safe. Because up until now, everything still has an explanation. Old footage resurfaces all the time. Celebrity remarks get clipped, twisted, and reinterpreted. Public figures step away, reinvent themselves, relocate. That's part of the cycle. None of it, standing alone, proves anything. But when all starts happening at the same time, that's when people hesitate. Because patterns aren't built on one moment. They're built on repetition, timing, convergence. And right now, too many of those pieces are aligning in a way that's difficult to dismiss. Look at the idea of image control. For years, Ellen DeGeneres didn't just host television, she engineered perception. Every smile, every dance, every public act of generosity reinforced a singular narrative: kindness. It wasn't just branding, it was armor, a carefully maintained version of reality that millions accepted without ever questioning what sat behind it. But when that armor fractured, it didn't just expose imperfections, it exposed contradiction. Because behind the curtain, the accounts didn't align with the image. Staff members describing a culture of tension, guests alluding to uncomfortable moments, industry voices, some of whom had known her for years, quietly acknowledging that what audiences saw wasn't the full story. And once that contrast is visible, everything else starts to shift. A resurfaced clip is no longer just a clip. It becomes context. Sandra Bullock laughing about an unusual facial treatment during an interview might have once felt harmless, even amusing. But when placed alongside ongoing conversations about youth, appearance, and unexplained methods, it lands differently. Not as evidence, not as proof, but as another fragment in a growing collection of unanswered questions. The same tension surrounds Chrissy Teigen, because in an environment where every word is managed, every statement reviewed, every joke filtered through layers of control, the moments that slip through carry weight, especially when they aren't clarified, especially when they're allowed to linger without correction. And that's what people are picking up on now. Not just what was said, but what was left unresolved. Then there's the system itself, the environment all of this exists within. Because Hollywood doesn't function like the outside world. It runs on proximity, on relationships, on unspoken understandings that keep everything moving without friction. And when something threatens that balance, the response isn't always confrontation. Sometimes it's distance, quiet, intentional distance, no loud denials, no aggressive defenses, just enough space for the story to exist, but not enough for it to fully solidify. Enough silence for questions to circulate, but not enough clarity to settle them. And that silence is what makes this moment feel different. Because people aren't as willing to accept surface-level explanations anymore. They've seen too many situations where the truth arrived late, where early signs were ignored, minimized, or laughed off, only to be taken seriously years later. So now they're looking sooner, looking deeper, connecting pieces in real time, which brings everything back to the same unresolved tension. If this is all coincidence, why does it keep overlapping? Why do the same names keep appearing in the same spaces? Why do old moments resurface precisely when new conversations begin? And why does the response from those involved feel so controlled? Not defensive, not transparent, controlled. Because control is what sustains the image. And once that control begins to slip, even slightly, the entire structure becomes harder to maintain. That doesn't mean every theory holds weight. It doesn't mean every connection is significant. But it does mean one thing. People are watching now, in a way they weren't before. And when that shift happens, when the audience stops accepting what's presented at face value, when they begin asking not just what they're seeing, but why they're seeing it, that's when narratives start to change. Not instantly, but inevitably. Because once a question takes hold in the public mind, it doesn't fade. It waits. And eventually, it demands an answer. What makes this story feel so unsettling isn't just what's been said, it's everything that's been left hanging. The footage exists. The moments happened. The connections are there. And yet every time the conversation edges towards something concrete, it slows, shifts direction, and fades into silence. But that kind of silence doesn't settle people. It sharpens their focus. Because now, audiences aren't just watching, they're dissecting. Every resurfaced clip, every passing remark, every sudden decision is being revisited through a completely different lens. And when you start aligning it all, the statements, the timing, the recurring patterns, it stops feeling accidental. It starts to feel managed. And that's where the real tension begins to live. Not in proven facts, but in the widening gap between what's visible and what feels obscured. Because if everything is as harmless as it seems, then why does it all feel so controlled? Why do the same figures keep appearing in the same conversations? Why do certain questions never receive direct answers? This isn't about confirming a theory. It's about recognizing a shift where audiences are no longer satisfied with surface explanations, where they're connecting details faster, questioning louder, and refusing to overlook what doesn't quite fit. The story isn't fading into the background. It's building, quietly, steadily, piece by piece. And whether people say it out loud or not, something about it feels off. So now the decision moves to you. Watch the clips, hear what was said, and pay attention to what wasn't. Decide for yourself what feels like coincidence and what doesn't. Because this conversation isn't disappearing, it's growing louder. And the closer it moves toward whatever truth sits beneath it, the harder it becomes to ignore.